Hey, everybody, welcome back to Business Shenanigans. I'm Trent May here from May Financial Group. With me, as always, your Moroccan superhero, Mahmoud Boutam from Sprout Digital. There he is. And our very special guest today, Rick Garrett. Rick Garrett from Rick's Rambles. Rick has a huge history in the entertainment business. We're really delighted and honored to have you on today. Rick, how's it going, man?
Hey, it's good. It's just been a beautiful stretch of weather here in Indianapolis, Indiana. We played at the State Fair yesterday, spent the day there playing some music and wandering around and eating that wonderful, healthy fair food. So life is good.
Oh, the state, that's a fair I haven't been to, the Indiana State Fair. How is it?
It's great. And it didn't happen last year because of COVID. They canceled it completely. So it was nice to get back. We played there. I don't know how many years we played there in a row, but just love the State Fair. Look forward to it every year. I get as excited as a 10-year-old kid to go to the fair and eat some corn dogs and cotton candy and all kinds of good stuff.
I think it's cool. You still love it after all these years.
I do. I grew old, but I didn't grow up.
That's great. That's what I love to hear.
Can you run us a little bit through your career, like your music career? I have not heard like your backstory.
Oh, sure. So I am an entertainer, a musician, storyteller, comedian, kind of a historic reenactor kind of person. I've done that. This is my 42nd year of doing that. So probably longer than both of your ages combined. Which doesn't
I'm 12,
make me,
so yeah, you got it.
which doesn't make me feel old at all. But I have had an interest in music and entertainment as long as I can remember. As a matter of fact, one of my earliest memories was sitting in a living room with my Uncle Bob, who basically raised me. He had this giant old wooden Philco radio. Some of the older viewers will know what I'm talking about. And on Saturday nights, we would sit and listen to the Grand Ole Opry live from Nashville, Tennessee. And I just was enamored with the idea of playing on stage, of entertaining folks. That's one of my very earliest memories in life. When I was young, I started playing the piano. And then started out with a gospel music quartet, traveling around and playing, and then landed in Branson, Missouri. Have y'all heard about Branson?
Yeah.
So Branson is a great entertainment town, and I did a couple of theater gigs down there for a few years, then came back home to Indiana, and have been playing ever since, mostly folk and bluegrass type music, but I also write. My wife also writes, so we do a fair amount of original music. We do things like festivals, fairs, church banquets, church events, corporate events, do a lot of corporate events. And then about 10 years ago, I had always kind of wanted to try stand-up comedy. I thought that sounded really interesting. And I'd been a storyteller, so it's not a great leap. And Comcast, the cable TV company, had a comedy contest. And on a spur of the moment decision, I decided to go give it a try. I had to write 5 minutes of original material. So not get up and tell street jokes, why did the chicken cross the road, but write 5 minutes of original material. And lo and behold, I won the contest, first trip out. And that got me a couple of appearances on TV. And started traveling around and doing that. I've got to work with some really, really incredible people. So that's a very nutshell glimpse into my life. So we can, do questions or whatever. It's something.
So you lived a couple of years in Branson?
Yes.
And you were like planning on staying there and like doing music, or it was
so,
just like.
So here's the interesting thing. When I was in Branson, we're talking about the mid '70s. There was not much there. There was a couple of theaters, the Baldmobbers and the Presleys. The big stars hadn't made it down there yet. There was Silver Dollar City, which is a kind of a historical theme park. And I would have stayed there, but I kind of thought that town was just not going anywhere. I thought it was always going to be this little sleepy town, that had a 3 or 4 month tourist season, and that would be about it. And I left and came back home. And of course, now it's like Vegas light almost.
Right. Like Nashville. Yeah. It's kind of like a music city right now, right?
It is. Absolutely, it is. Yeah. So that's what I have always just loved to do. And at an early age, I realized that every day we have a choice whether to use what our talents, our God-given talents may be for good or not for good. We can be positive or we can be negative. And I've always viewed entertaining as a way to make the world a better place, to spread a positive message, to build people up. And I think it's even more important today because in the world of social media, it's easy to get sucked into that constant negativity and constant arguing and bickering back and forth. So that's why I do what I do.
I want to talk
We definitely
to you
need alternative. Sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to talk to you a bit about that negativity, because I'm sure, as you know very, very well, more so than Mahmood and I, you have to have some very thick skin to be a stand-up comedian.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And not only just for you, but I think people don't realize people have this circle around them. And even though you have thick skin, maybe your girlfriend doesn't, maybe your workmate doesn't, and maybe they see these comments about you, and maybe it tears them up a little bit. So what I would really like to know is how hard was that transition for you from, music to comedy? Were people, a little harder on you? Was the feedback a little more fierce? How was that transition?
Oh, that's a really great question. And I will say that the transition was a little bit difficult, but for a reason that you may not imagine. So at that point, 35 or so years, I had always been on stage with something between me and the audience, a guitar or a piano or, some kind of instrument. So there was like a physical barrier between me and the audience.
Okay.
Suddenly I'm up there with nothing but me and my thoughts. And that was difficult. I didn't realize how much I counted on that barrier to kind of separate me from the audience. So that was one of the difficult things. By and large, the audiences that I have performed for in comedy have been incredibly friendly and welcome and opening. But there have been exceptions to that, and it's usually late at night when the alcohol has been flowing for a few hours. And people don't realize
those comedy clubs usually have a 2-drink minimum. So
that's right. People don't realize it's my show and not their show. And there is I'm trying to think of the word that I want there. There's an age issue in comedy. I'm in my mid-60s, and there's not a lot of mid-60-year-old comedians still out there kind of doing it almost full-time. Most comedy clubs will not hire somebody my age.
Really?
I actually had a club tell me one time, we will not hire anyone over 35 because they don't relate to our target audience.
Wow.
And so I don't do a lot of club work. I've done a few. I headlined a club right before COVID hit, but I do a lot of, like I mentioned, corporate type events.
Mm-hmm.
I work clean. I do some church shows, some like banquets, holiday banquets, and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I love those kind of audiences. So I've missed a lot of the heckling, but I've had a little bit too. And you do have to grow a little bit of a thick skin to deal with that.
Absolutely. I think there would be a good niche for that, like a clean comedian. Like it's hard to find.
It is, and my favorite comedians have always worked clean. If I had to name a number one top clean comedian, it's Bob Newhart, and most people know him more as an actor because of his TV shows. But before he was an actor, he was a stand-up comedian, very clever, very witty, very quick, and if you listen to his early albums, all 100% clean. Haywood Banks, I don't know if you guys might know who Haywood Banks is, but all of his stuff is really, really clean.
Yeah, toast.
Yeah, so
it Brian is Reagan. I like
Oh yes,
Brad.
my gosh, yes,
He's
yes.
probably the cleanest comedy, and really, really good too. You would think that clean comedy is not going to be funny, but he's just killer.
He's great. As a matter of fact, not too long before COVID, I saw a show here in Indianapolis. It was he and Haywood Banks together, and holy cow, that was an incredible, incredible show.
I bet. That's awesome.
Sorry, Mahmood, I cut you off like twice now.
Oh, you're good. I was just gonna ask Rick about like his process. Like, do you write jokes, or do you just get up on stage and start riffing, and then things come up, and then you write it down afterwards? Like, how do you work out, so to speak?
Well, that's a great question. So it's 80% pre-written material and 20% what comes to me on the moment. So I am always, I've always been an observer of people, and that's where a lot of my original music comes from, just from observing everyday life around me. And real life is much funnier than anything I could ever make up. So I'll just observe people, write out scenarios, do what I can to make it funny. But often something will happen during a show that, I'll get lucky and it will inspire me on the moment. But 80%, it's not like I write it out word for word, but I write concepts out and I write ideas out. And I'll usually write a punchline out and then just kind of go from there. So
Nice.
the interesting thing about being an entertainer is if you do it full time, you probably only spend about 20% of your time actually entertaining. The rest of the time you're writing, you're practicing, you're booking,
Polishing.
you're doing publicity. Yeah, exactly. All kinds of stuff. So,
Right.
the actual entertaining is only is probably the smallest part of what we do.
I have a question about like your material. So you face an audience and you've got, let's say, 5 jokes. You tell those 5 jokes and it's explosive. Everyone's laughing. And then you go to a different audience and maybe it's like less laughing. How do you read your audience? How do you go like, I see a lot of young people here. Maybe I should, like, do you have those pivoting moments where you're like, I'm going to switch my material a little bit. I see some 20-year-olds here. I see some, like how do you decide that?
I do that, and I always make a point to get to shows way, way early, and I find kind of a dark corner back in the room, and I grab me a diet soda or an iced tea or something, and I kind of go over my notes a little bit, and I just look at the room, and I see what the audience is made up of, and there's a lot, the age is the big thing, but white collar, blue collar, college group. And I will, there are some bits that are not because of content, but because of relatability may not be suitable for some audiences. If I'm doing a church senior citizens banquet, man, I have a lot of material about that getting old kind of sucks. I have a lot of material about that. And that's great, but that's not going to fly with the college crowd. So, they want material about, entering the workforce and, raising families, getting started on your life. So, yeah, absolutely. I go early, I read the room, and I'll kind of throw things in and out depending on what I feel like the makeup of the room is.
Right. That must be so cool to just be flexible and just look at the room and go, oh, okay, I know exactly what to talk about tonight. That must be so good, like as a feeling.
It is a good feeling when it hits. It doesn't always hit.
You're like, look at all these people. I'm gonna bomb tonight.
There have been nights I've walked off stage and go, man, I just cannot wait to do this again. And there's been nights I've walked off stage and have went, God, I hope I never have to do that again.
Well, these days on Mondays, you're dropping the Rick's Rambles podcast. And I've got the anchor link down there in the bottom. I'll throw it up. Here we go. Right here. If you want to find, and I listened to it myself. Let's see if I can pull it up here. I had it. I listened to it myself on Google Podcasts. You can see now.
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah. Google Podcasts. You are all drops on Mondays, all about positivity. You mentioned that you try, in this ever increasing kind of toxic social media environment, you're really trying to stay positive. Let's step back a second. Where did that become important for you, the positivity?
That is, again, goes back to my earliest memories. So my childhood was pretty difficult. I spent a lot of time in and out of foster homes. There were times that I didn't know if I would have a place to sleep at night. For a 4 or 5, 6, 7-year-old kid, that's really, really difficult. But I mentioned my Uncle Bob, who kind of raised me, especially after I got up to about 8 or so years old. He had a very difficult life too. He was a coal miner in East Tennessee. His mother died when he was 9 or 10 years old. He went to work in the coal mines when he was 13 years old. Don't know how much you know about coal mining, but that is a tough way of life. 13 years old, digging coal out of the ground. He survived a shootout in a coal mine during a time of labor unrest down there by hiding under one of the coal carts that they pull the coal out of the ground with. And he became the most positive man I've ever met in my life. He laughed all the time. He told jokes all the time. He always looked on the sunny side of life. And if I can think of one man that was a huge influence on me, it was him. He probably had every right to be miserable for the rest of his life from his teenage years but he wasn't. He just was always positive, always looked on the bright side, always appreciated the little things in life. And I just kind of took that with me. I kind of remember being young and in that foster home phase, and when things were really difficult, I just remember being miserable all the time. I was hurting, I was sad, I was young, but I was depressed. I know that I was, clinically depressed, although we didn't recognize that back in the early 1960s very much. And it just came to me from watching him that I kind of had a choice. I could, accentuate the positive, deal with the negative, spread that positivity, or I could just remain negative all the time. And so I've had to make that conscious choice, for the next 50 some odd years from those early years in my life. And that's where all that comes from. And I'll be honest, there are days it's not always easy. There are days that I struggle a little bit with that, especially in 2020 when COVID hit. So in 2019, my wife also is a musician. She's a fiddle player, an amazing vocalist, songwriter. We did 200 dates all over the Midwest. We stayed incredibly busy. Then COVID hit, and in 2020, we did 6. Now, not only was that a big emotional letdown, because I used to being busy all the time. Mm-hmm. I used to having projects to work on. But it was financially tough too, because that was a good portion of our income. And it would have been easy for me just to fall back into that being incredibly miserable, incredibly sad. But I just worked hard on staying positive. And I wanted to spread that to other people. And that's how the idea of the podcast came about. Doing 200 dates a couple of years ago, I could reach a lot of people with a positive message through comedy, through music. Drop that down to 6 gigs in 2020. Wasn't reaching very many people. So I thought this was a really good way for me to reach people, to help them stay positive. I always thought that was kind of my life's mission, was to help people stay positive, to spread positive molecules, to quote a comedian friend of mine.
Okay. And I love that you started the podcast. And I follow you on Twitter also. You're a great follow on Twitter. One thing I love, and this is so simple, but it's so great, and that is, boom, the socks of the day. I love the socks of the day so much. I mean, if you had to ballpark it, like how many unique socks do you think you have?
Oh my gosh, I have no idea. I have developed an unhealthy obsession with unique, fancy socks, and I'm always looking for more.
But tell us about the. Well, speaking of looking for more, I want to before we get into the podcast here, throw this up. If you love Rick Garrett's work, or if you want to support his sock obsession, go to right here at buymeacoffee.com/Rick Garrett. Doesn't have to just go for coffee.
That's right. That's right. I should change that to buymesocks.com.
I want to speak on the podcast now. If you could tell us about the format of your podcast and what you try to do each episode that drops on Mondays.
Oh, sure. So each episode I do what I call fun facts. I look at 10 or so fun facts, usually about a random topic, but something that is important to me. A couple of weeks ago, I did the St. Louis Arch, 10 fun facts about the St. Louis Arch. Last week was 10 fun facts about Muncie, Indiana, the town where I spent the bulk of my life. I've done fun facts about turtles. Yeah, you see a big turtle tank here behind me. Fun facts about cats. So I like to spread some interesting information. And then I do a good news or a feel-good story of the week. And I'm looking for people who impact the world in a positive way with what they do. One recent one I really enjoyed was a lady who had adopted a stray cat, and she was an optometrist for children, and she taught the cat to wear glasses so kids would not be so afraid of wearing glasses. I love that story. The trouble with those feel good stories, I'm a pretty emotional guy, so if they involve dogs or cats, I'm usually crying halfway through reading the story.
Nothing wrong with that.
That's right.
So I was listening to that podcast thinking, I want someone to draw me a diagram of how they got the cat to wear glasses.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. We have 2 rescued cats here, and there's no way they would stand for that. So I do a feel good story of the week. I typically do a nostalgia segment, like the number 1 songs, number 1 TV shows, number 1 movies from a certain year, usually the 1970s, because that's the decade that I remember the most. And then I try to close out with another positive message. And I mentioned my other Bob. I always close the podcast with a quote from Otto the comic, who was the first comedian I ever worked with on a professional level here in Indianapolis. He passed away a couple of years ago from cancer in his mid-50s, and he is greatly, greatly missed. But he ended all of his shows by saying, be kind to as many people as you can, as often as you can. We'll start right now, and we'll make a better place. And I always end it hoping folks would take that with them. So Otto, let me tell you about Otto for a minute. He always kept a bell on stage. I'm going to reach over here. You've seen these, hotel desks, restaurants, whatever. And he would punctuate his punchlines by ringing that bell. Shortly after Otto passed away, I won the Hoosier Comedy Award that I was so grateful to have won that. And one of the prizes was one of Otto's bell. And
cool.
That is just an incredibly, incredibly prized possession for me.
That's such a cool story. Rick, I can't thank you enough for jumping on with us. Give you some plugs here. I can't put you over enough. Your awesome bit on Look Who's Laughing is on YouTube. We'll put a link to that in the comments.
Oh, thank you.
I've
kind of forgotten that was there.
It's a good bit. Lots of great original songs.
Yes.
We posted one yesterday on our page. Jerry's Hat. That's just like a nice little tune. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Nice hat.
And follow him on Facebook. Follow him on Twitter. And we've got the link for you. It's scrolling across the bottom. I'll put it again right here. Check out his podcast. Is a nice little 15-minute listen on Mondays. You can do it while doing the dishes. You can do it while going for a walk. It's it's a nice way to start off the week.
Thank you. That's what I was going for, to start the week on a positive note for folks. Mondays can be a little bit challenging, so I appreciate that so much.
Yeah. There's the link. Buy them a cup of coffee or some socks. They're both about $5. I'm Trent May, Mahmood Batam, Sprout Digital. Rick, thanks for jumping on with us. Literally, this has been such a pleasure. Anytime you want to jump on and ramble with us, just let us know.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you,
a dangerous
Rick.
invitation to have.
Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Thank
we'll
you.
see you.